Our next speaker is Ms. Charmaine Russin. She is director of the Pennsylvania Coalition for Informed Consent. She's a homeschooling mom of 3, ministry leader, liberty advocate, founding member of the Pennsylvania Coalition, as I mentioned, and she's served in that organization's leadership as the group has grown from just over 100 members at its inception in 2015 to about 2,000 members today. And the organization includes and represents people of all faiths. Her service is in response to God's call in her life, and she will be speaking today related to her thoughts about this issue of the COVID vaccine, pending vaccine, potential vaccine, as it relates to parental rights and individual rights to vaccinate their children or themselves. Charmaine, thank you.
Thank you, Representative. The fact that informed consent and bodily autonomy are a basic human right is written in multiple international human rights documents, as well as etched indelibly on the spirit of every living person. True informed consent requires information as well as the freedom to make a choice without penalty or coercion. Yet institutions throughout the United States, including state governments, fail to honor the dignity of the individual by mandating vaccines across populations. While all of medicine becomes increasingly individualized, these out-of-date, one-size-fits-all vaccine programs continue to harm and create animosity among people. How can it be that a state government in a free country can hold a child's civil right to education hostage under the requirement that the child be injected with a risk-carrying prophylactic pharmaceutical product? Some children are not even allowed to attend virtual school unless they're up to date on their vaccines. And now these children are not only discriminated against in equal opportunity to education, but they're also victims of institutionalized discrimination in healthcare. I'm here today representing thousands of families across the Commonwealth who will fight to the end to maintain our right to make medical decisions for our children and ourselves. But I'm also representing a growing number of healthcare workers, private sector employees, and college students who are finding their right to informed consent and bodily autonomy threatened as more and more industries ask their employees and students to waive their rights and instead choose vaccinations. Making a medical choice under threat of professional or financial penalty does not meet the criteria for informed consent. In 2005, the United Nations Education, Science, and Culture Organization adopted its Universal Declaration on Bioethics and Human Rights. In Article 6 of this document, we read, quote, "Any preventative, diagnostic, and therapeutic medical intervention is only to be carried out with the prior free and informed consent of the person concerned based on adequate information," end quote. Consent must be free from penalty or coercion, and it must be based on adequate information. So where do we get this information? From our doctor's office, where we're given a simple vaccine information sheet, the skeletal remains of the complete product information that would be necessary to make a truly informed decision? Should we go dig into the famously obfuscated data available on the conflict of interest-ridden CDC's website? Maybe we should look to the HHS, who were charged in 1986 with monitoring the childhood vaccine schedule's safety, but failed to produce even one report on the safety of that schedule over the last 34 years. Or should we trust the manufacturers, who are allowed to conduct their own safety studies, but who are regularly settling cases out of court for fraud allegations in the fines of the millions of dollars? Merck has been in federal court for over 10 years, fighting fraud allegations brought by its own virologists for faking the efficacy of the mumps vaccine, which, by the way, is still on the CDC's recommended childhood schedule. This is the same manufacturer who brought us Vioxx. And no one can forget the tragic legacy of the pharma-induced opioid crisis in our nation. So are these companies a trusted place to find information? Perhaps we should look to Google. But knowing that Google's parent company is currently invested in upward of 80 healthcare initiatives, including several vaccine makers, they may have a vested interest in creating public bias. If vaccines are as safe and effective as they're touted to be, then why has the industry pushed so hard against people's right to informed consent? If the potential for injury from these products is as minuscule as the manufacturers would have us believe, then why don't they just take financial responsibility for the harm caused by their products? With revenues in the hundreds of billions of dollars a year, they should be able to afford it. Growing up, my dad told me that when someone says, "Trust me," don't. We need our legislators to step up and to work together to protect these basic human rights of all Americans. The psychological violence and immeasurable human cost of mandatory vaccinations is not a path to public health. It's a cultural backsliding to a time when discrimination was acceptable and dignity was reserved only for the majority. Where there's a risk, there must always be a choice. And when vaccines are involved, there is always a risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Charmaine Russin. And Charmaine, in her bio that was sent over, she had written in there that Charmaine's service is a response to God's call on her life to follow Jesus and be a voice for the voiceless by advocating for parental and individual rights to vaccine choice here in Pennsylvania. And Charmaine, thank you for the work that you're doing, for founding the organization that you're involved in, because as you know, as Stephanie knows, there's a lot of public peer-type pressure. There's a lot of pressure from the medical community. There's a lot of pressure from the big pharma community that's making billions and billions of dollars off of these products that are being forced upon individuals through government, through coercion within the medical community. So we appreciate that you've taken a stand and that you're doing this work to speak up for many people who won't be able to speak up, don't have the courage to speak up for themselves. Hopefully this press conference today will encourage more of those individuals to join your group and to join with these other professionals that you're going to hear from now, so that they can take a stand for liberty and for what's in the best interests of their children and themselves.